Good morning. Wonderful. I know it's been 3 long days, and I know there's a lot of folks are ready for this all to end and to perhaps do a little bit of shopping before heading back home. But do bear with us. We're going to try and make this session, it's your last plenary session. We're going to try to make it as interesting as possible, but not just interesting. We want this to be as practical as possible. So from this session, I won't just be looking to the panelists, but I'll be looking specifically to you in the audience for some really concrete ideas. Now, I won't go through the process again of introducing the panelists. I think you've just heard who they are, each very distinguished in their respective fields. And the same expectation I have of you, I will have of them, which is to be very specific, very practical, very concrete in the ideas we're going to be looking for from this session. So as you've heard, my name is Stephen Rodriguez. I'm the resident representative ad interim here for UNDP in Rwanda. And again, it's a great pleasure for me to personally welcome you all here. Now, over the last 2 days, we have spent quite a lot of time looking at the economic dimension of regional integration. I think 2 days ago, we heard Paul Collier make a very strong case that the integration process actually reduces inequality and promotes inclusion. And what I want from the panelists and from you, I'm putting you at notice in advance because I'm going to change the way this session works. There are 3 things I want to get from it. One is to identify those big risks that could potentially cause widening inequality or could cause women or youth or persons with disability or small entrepreneurs to be left out of this process. So I want to know where the risks are, where the obstacles are, and I want to hear not just from the panel, but I want to hear from you as well. So I'll perhaps start by asking 2 members of the panel to help us identify where those risk areas are, and then I'm going to turn to you and ask you, because we have a lot of experts in this room, to give me your views as well on specifically that issue. So I don't want long, flowery speeches from anyone. I want very concrete identification of where those risks are. And then I want to identify the good examples and the good practices in addressing these kinds of issues of exclusion, of dealing with youth or extremism, etc., all the different risk factors that we see. Are there good examples and good programs? And then finally, related to that, what do we want to recommend to policymakers as concrete suggestions? So as we move forward with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, what concretely do we want to recommend to policymakers in terms of addressing those areas where there are potential risks to widening inequality, to creating conflict, to creating exclusion? So this is all I want from this session. Again, as I said, we don't want this to be another talk shop. I want it to be as concrete as possible. So with that in mind, I want 2 members of the panel. So I don't want to go through a process of each person giving us a presentation. The 2 members of the panel who feel most comfortable to kick us off with identifying what those areas of risk are. Where do we see the major barriers, the major obstacles, the major risks?
A picking up of that very disaster we want to fight. And when I looked at Africa, the numbers were like double what they were globally. When I looked down to Eastern Africa, the figures were triple. Like literally a third of the Eastern African population was really stricken by hunger. And really that's a big risk. We need really to be aware of what does that mean in terms of this integration, the growth, what are we doing about agriculture? What are those big firms are doing with our farmers? What is the financial sector doing really to address this issue? I think that's one risk. Another risk I can identify is really it's a risk, a blessing in disguise, but still a risk, depending on how we manage it. It can be bad or really disastrous. The rapid increase of our youth population. And majority of whom is distancing themselves from agriculture and from primary production. It's another risk for me. Rapid in the sense that we already know that a fourth of African population is youth. And we know that by 2030, our youth population will have increased by 42%. This 75% of really unpaid work being accounted for women. I mean, women accounting for the 75% of the unpaid work. And that's really a stubborn proportion, and it's not been declining. This financial gap, which has been sticky for the developing countries from 2011, it is stuck at 9%, despite increasing levels of financial inclusion. What does that mean? That means that in other countries, it's even increasing, like in Burkina Faso, like in Ethiopia. Financial inclusion is increasing, but increasing more than for men than it is increasing for women, and the gender gap widens. So those are really the things we have to look as we make progress